Lift off.
Lift off. Okay. Happy Monday, everyone.
Happy Monday.
You've all been waiting for this. I can see.
Anticipation.
Yes. So, do they know what we're going to be talking about this week?
Not unless they've read the title.
Oh, that might be a giveaway. But it also might be leading them in the wrong direction. Who knows?
Our titles aren't that ingenious. They're not that clever.
They're not. So we're going to be talking about loneliness. Is that right?
Yes, I thought it was a good topic to talk about. Current.
Yeah, again, particularly at the moment. So where do we start with loneliness?
Have you felt lonely? We could start that kind of.
Oh, well, okay. Let's start
But
with
maybe
me.
I was going to say, should we talk non-pandemic loneliness?
Well, yeah, I think we should, but I don't think we can ignore the pandemic entirely. Maybe we'll come on to that later on, because maybe certain people are feeling lonely for the first time as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So, sorry, ask your question again. Short-term memory loss. Have I ever felt lonely?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I have, as you well know, I have spent long parts of my life living alone, living on my own. And in a sense, at one level, you get very used to being on your own, and I'm very comfortable with my own company, which not everybody is. But I think there are moments when certainly I have experienced in the past, you suddenly feel just, even though you've got friends, even though you're seeing people at work, you just feel suddenly just very, very isolated, as though you really are almost the only person in the world. And I think part of it was, the fact that we were separated. So although I wasn't alone in the sense that I would see people every day, it's that sometimes you're not seeing the people you want to see. So the fact that
you're seeing millions of other people doesn't make up for it.
Yeah, and so you do have this sense of loneliness because the special people in your life aren't there for whatever reason.
Interesting.
So have you felt lonely? Because I ask that because loneliness, I think, is sometimes, rightly or wrongly, I think probably wrongly, very much associated with people in later life, with old age, that you almost naturally think of, loneliness, that's something that you get when you're old and widowed or living alone. But how about young people?
I'm sure I have, but I don't know if I knew it properly until the pandemic. I don't know. I think I've never had chronic loneliness, if that makes sense. Maybe I've had like minutes of it, but maybe I didn't fully understand it. So maybe, for example...
Can we just be clear? What do you mean by chronic loneliness?
I mean like feeling it for days in a row, like continuously, not for like an hour and then being fine.
In which case then I possibly haven't had chronic loneliness either. And you have pangs of it, but it then reaches a crescendo, but then goes away again.
Yeah, like I might go to bed and then the next day I feel fine.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense to me because I've encountered the same kind of emotions and feelings.
But I don't know, I don't know, because I feel like it's such a kind of vague...
Yes, that's the whole point. It's very difficult to define, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I said before, as you know, I've lived on my own for long periods of my life. So at one level, you can be alone, but I don't think that necessarily means that you are lonely.
Yeah.
Because I enjoy living alone. I enjoy my own company, but I don't enjoy loneliness, and I don't think they're the same thing. In that loneliness is when it's more of a feeling of despair that there's nobody there. There's nobody to reach out to.
Yeah, I guess so. That's why I'm kind of, I can think of scenarios where I possibly felt lonely, but I guess I was, but maybe I didn't really understand it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's why I asked about the extent to which you can have loneliness within young people, because it is, I think, something that's often very much associated with being elderly, as I said before. But actually, I think a lot of young people feel very lonely. Teenagers growing up can feel very lonely.
Well, that's what I was going to think. I think surely as a teenager, even if we had friends, I think all teenagers go through a phase where they feel that no one else understands them or
Absolutely.
what they're going through. So I feel like you do feel lonely. Absolutely. In that kind of sense. Because I do remember there were times, even though I would literally just go out with my friends and just have sometimes a good time. And I remember being on the bus home and I just feel kind of out of place.
Right.
But I don't know if that's just the normal teenage experience, like it's the hormones and the feelings. And
I never felt that as a teenager. I always felt absolutely in my zone, always surrounded by friends and what have you. I never felt lonely at all as a teenager. Actually, I possibly felt much more lonely when I was younger than teenage, more about 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 11, maybe 12. I think I felt more lonely then.
Well, because I think as an only child, I'm sure I must have felt lonely at some times.
Yeah, although maybe because you were a lonely child, you maybe accepted it more as a norm.
Yeah, so that's why I think I'm fine with my own company, as you said. Like that's why I think sometimes I'm alone, but I don't feel lonely. But I think that's what I mean. I think it's more of a kind of instant rather than a chronic kind of thing of always. So I think, as I said, I think it was like sometimes, I don't know, maybe I was thinking of something or thinking that I was the only one going through this and no one would understand, or maybe I didn't discuss it with my friends. So then on the bus ride home, I was, looking out the car, pretending I was in a film with my music on and feeling
So you're
lonely.
in your own world.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's loneliness per se. I had this kind of flashback, but I'm not sure it's loneliness. I think it's just, I don't know.
But I think I certainly, as I say, when I was pre-teenage, probably between, as I say, around the ages of around 8 and 12, I actually sought loneliness, if that makes sense. I would seek solitude. I would go off and play by myself. I would go off and find spaces entirely where I could be alone. And as you know, unlike you, I did have siblings, but I was a bit estranged from my siblings. I didn't really play with my siblings. And I would just go off and be on my own. And I don't know, is that normal? I don't know. I actually thought it was quite abnormal.
I don't know. I don't know kids' behaviour. I don't think normal is a word to use.
No, we're all different.
I think, some kids get overwhelmed easily by being around people, or so for them it's perfectly normal. For all you know, you'd get overwhelmed, and that was your way of dealing with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I felt overwhelmed. I just liked to be alone. I just liked to go off and...
I think maybe nowadays kids don't spend enough alone time. I remember we used to get put in the car and just, maybe we'd have one toy with us, but maybe you'd listen to some music, but you were kind of left alone to play alone, whereas now it's like they get an iPad or a phone or something shoved in their face. Like kids aren't left alone, I think.
Well, I think certainly compared to my generation, what has changed is a sense of protection, health and safety, if you see what I mean. And I think some of that's positive, some of it's negative. But as a child, I was left alone in a ways that I would not feel comfortable leaving you alone at certain ages, although my parents left me alone. And also, I was allowed to just go off on my own. I would go off. I realise you don't know what I'm talking about, but there was this meadow near the churchyard where we lived, and I'd just go over and just wander around and look at things. And my point is that wouldn't almost be allowed today. You'd be seen as an irresponsible parent if you let your 7 or 8 year old kid just like wander around the meadow on Saturday mornings on their own.
Yeah, because surely it's not safe for kidnapping purposes.
Well, is it safe? I don't know. But the point is, we have this protection. I'm not saying my parents were uncaring and not protecting. It's just that
new standards.
Yeah, completely. I think we're going off the point a little bit, but let's get back to loneliness. So
I think
I'm not quite. So you probably did feel alone as a child.
Yeah, I mean, I was alone, but did I feel lonely? I don't know. I'm sure at times I did.
Right. So what did you do about it?
I don't know as a kid. I don't know at the time. Or like, I'm sure I must have felt lonely at some point at uni, especially first year, having just moved, having to meet new friends. I had no friends there. And that's normal.
I mean, a lot of first years go through absolute, well, we would never use the term loneliness. We would just say, oh, they're homesick.
Yeah. And I found it weird, and I'd say, oh, I feel homesick, which is very strange for me. I never feel homesick because I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Mm.
So I'd find it weird. So I don't think I ever thought of myself as lonely necessarily. I'd say, oh, I'm nostalgic. I miss my friends.
Right.
But I wouldn't say, oh, I'm lonely.
Right.
So I think it's a new kind of term for me because I think because I'm an only child, or the way I grew up, I don't mind being alone necessarily. Sometimes I like being left alone. Sometimes I like my alone time.
Maybe you get that from me.
I think I'm a kind of introverted extrovert. Like I need some time alone to recharge.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I get that entirely.
Some people recharge by being around people all the time. I sometimes need, a day left alone, and then I'll be happy to socialize again.
Maybe I was always like that. Maybe that's why I would seek solitude from a very young age.
Don't know.
But the other thing is that we were talked last week about relationships in our Q&A. But I think a number of people can actually feel alone even though they're in a relationship, if that makes sense.
You can be alone you can feel lonely in a crowd of people. It's a bit like what we were saying before, that you kind of feel out of place or misunderstood, or that even though you're seeing all these people every day, they're not the people you feel you need.
So what does one do about that? Does that mean that one has to change the people you're seeing, or?
I think potentially feeling lonely is an indicator that something has to change.
Right.
So either with the people you surround yourself or with yourself, that maybe you need to seek some help professionally.
So loneliness essentially is an indicator of discontent in some form or another. Something's just not right.
I think so. I'm not a professional, but that's kind of an understanding. So maybe you need to put yourself out there more. So for example, I know that at uni, and I regret it now, I didn't join any societies or clubs.
Why is that?
I don't know. I was too scared.
Or
but maybe if I had, I would have made even more friends. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have made friends and good friends, but maybe I would have met more people in different groups with similar interests. So then I'd always kind of have something to do or someone to talk about something specific with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that could have been something I did wrong and didn't really realize until I was like, oh, it's too late now. I'm too scared.
So it's a kind of, that's another interesting point that you raise, that some people are actually too scared to reach out and join new clubs, new societies, whatever it might be, because they're worried that people
they won't fit in.
They won't fit in. People might laugh at them behind their back or whatever it might be, and somehow they'll just be marginalised even further, be pushed out even further, and that must be a terrible feeling.
So I think, as I said, it's maybe an indicator that you need to change something. Either push yourself to find a hobby or something that you love and join people doing it, or rethink the relationship if you're talking about a relationship, or rethink the friends you're with if you're not feeling comfortable talking about it, or maybe check up on your mental health. Maybe you need to seek some help, and But
I think the other thing is, again, we're talking more about relationships now than perhaps loneliness, although it's related. And I certainly know people, or have known people, who have been in a relationship where they are clearly not happy, but they stay in the relationship because of the fear of loneliness. They just really hate the idea of being alone. Even though they've not necessarily spent any time on their own, the sheer fear of it makes them stick in something that they're not happy with. I just don't understand that personally.
Yeah, but you're saying this as a person that seeked alone time.
Absolutely. I'm saying that from my point of view. I don't understand it.
So, for example, I didn't have any siblings, but maybe if I had 10 siblings and I was literally never left alone, like I shared a room with a sibling, there was always someone in the house.
You crave it.
I think it can be difficult for people that have that kind of noise and company 24/7 for years on end to then be left alone.
Right.
I think. But I don't think being alone is a bad thing. I don't know why or how it's been kind of painted as a bad thing. Maybe not a bad thing, but I think it's been...
But because you're right, it is normally seen as being very negative, and I never thought of it like that. I think it's because people associate also loneliness with depression.
Yeah, and that's not to undermine... Like, I think there's a kind of limit of how alone and lonely you can and should be, in my opinion, because humans are social creatures.
Yeah, pack animals.
Like, we're pack animals, so we do need that social interaction to kind of feed our mental health and health in general and brains, and you need to stimulate your brain. So I think loneliness is interlinked with mental health issues and can cause, if it's chronic loneliness, I do believe it can cause depression, anxiety, any other kind of physical health problems. So it's not to be undermined, but I think, again, I don't see why it's bad to be left alone at times.
As long as, from extending what you've just said, which I think is very interesting, as long as the individual can cope with it. It's about a coping mechanism.
Yeah. And I guess circumstances and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know what the fine line... I think what I would say the bottom line is just check up on people. Yeah. If you know someone's alone and you're worried about it, or if you know maybe they're not, completely alone, but they live in a household where they feel a bit disconnected, check up on them.
Yeah, very good advice.
And
also, the other side of the coin, if you are feeling alone,
reach out.
Try and reach out as well. And I know that sometimes can be incredibly difficult because you're then worried about what people might think about you and so on and so forth. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And there are, there's always people there to help.
And I think you're literally, especially now, you're not the only one. Like, it's something so many people are feeling at the same time. But maybe if 2, 3, 4 of those people actually reached out, less people would actually feel alone and lonely.
Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Yeah, I don't know. Should we I feel like we're gradually escalating into pandemic loneliness.
You mean, yeah, well, we are. Because obviously loneliness has been enforced on people in a way that...
Yeah, I feel like that's the difference. That I think now, for me, as I said, I think I must have felt lonely, but I feel like now that I'm kind of forced into it, I understand it more. Whereas at the time I would have said, oh, I feel a bit homesick, I feel a bit anxious, I feel a bit this. But I don't think I would have said, I feel lonely. Whereas now I think having experienced it or being enforced into it, I can more confidently say that I have felt loneliness. Even though I don't mind being alone. So I think that's like what I was saying before about kind of the boundaries of how long someone can go with being alone and not being lonely. I think I understood how big my boundaries are of being left alone and enjoying it, and then to what extent it's kind of taking a toll on my health, mental health. Or
well, it's interesting when we talked in a previous episode about what we want to do post-lockdown, with both of us, it wasn't like, oh, I suddenly want to travel the world, or it was about, I want to see people again. I want to, that's the immediate reaction, is I want to socialize.
Yeah. Did you know?
No.
I read a study that said that loneliness can be contagious.
Ooh, that's
so,
interesting.
for example...
that kind of sounds contradictory, because if you're alone, who are you going to meet to infect them with? But
well, if you're living in a household and someone feels lonely...
Oh, I see what you mean.
Then it's contagious. The study showed that like 50% of people were more likely to feel lonely as well if they were with someone that felt lonely.
Yeah, I guess that goes back to what I was saying about how you can feel lonely within a relationship. And you're right. And I notice with us living together, when I'm alone, I actually tend not to think very much about my own feelings. Does that make sense? Whereas when I'm with you, and you might be a bit huffy puffy, or I might be a bit huffy puffy, we're much more aware of each other's mood, and that makes you aware of your own mood. Does that make sense?
Yeah, does. So, do you think we should kind of give some kind of solutions, discuss?
Well, I don't think we have any solutions. We can maybe give advice.
Suggestions?
Well, you talked about reaching out, joining clubs where one can.
I think, first of all, it's important to understand, because sometimes people might feel they don't have enough friends, but I would argue that it's not about the quantity, but about the quality of people you surround yourself with.
Better to have one really, really good friend you can talk to about anything whenever you like than
having 50.
100 Facebook friends that you don't really know.
Yeah. And I found, I don't know, maybe this is a conversation for another time, but I found that men have more quantity of people.
Yes.
Lads, like, they keep saying hi to everyone. Any of my friends will go out, they'll say hi to 10 people.
Yes, hadn't you realised that's because men are like really shallow?
And then, but I'm like, but are you guys friends? They're like, yeah. I'm like, but he doesn't know about this. So they don't have quantity friends, whereas I feel like, I don't know, I feel like girls, we have more quantity and we talk about stuff. And
quality, I think you mean.
Yeah, quality. Like, we talk about things, we discuss things. I don't know. Maybe I think this is going to go in a different direction, but
it's a gender thing. Yeah.
I think it's a gender thing, but I would say, yeah. So don't feel lonely if you feel that you don't have enough friends. I think it's finding those few people that you feel connected with.
Yes.
And I would say check in with people. Call, text. I don't think people do it enough. I've been
really trying to do that in the last couple of months in this new phase of lockdown. Just sending people a message saying, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
I just think it's important sometimes to just let people know, A, you're around, and they're you're thinking of them.
Yeah. So yeah, call, text. If you have an elderly neighbour that you realise haven't seen anyone, maybe send them a little postcard.
Just drop it through the door.
Yeah, drop a little letter. Because, as we said, we do, I think, kind of associate loneliness maybe with older people, but, I think it's a little act of kindness that might be quite nice for someone that's even more isolated due to the pandemic. I think people need to maybe find new ways to stay in contact or embrace the new ways of being in contact, because I feel like a lot of us, and I think I might be guilty, obviously we prefer to see people in person, and then we're like, oh, I'm not going to have a Zoom party or a quiz or I don't know. But maybe we need to actually embrace it, because then we don't end up doing anything.
Yeah,
I've not once had a Zoom quiz. First lockdown, they were like the thing to do. Never did one.
Well, I don't like quizzes anyway, but we have had one Zoom party. How sad is that?
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Months.
It's kind of like clearly we or the people around us didn't really embrace the idea of it in that kind of sense of being like, okay, this is a new way. If we want to stay in contact, maybe you have to kind of embrace it. And
one of the problems I have with this is that, and I don't know, other people may feel the same way, but in the last few months, I feel that I've been sitting at my desk, staring at my screen on my PC, not necessarily talking to people remotely, but very often doing that. But you feel as though you've been staring at a screen all day long. And I'm not sure I actually then want to do that in a social way in the evening as well.
I understand that, but I think, so for example, recently, kind of spontaneously, I arranged a call with one of my really close friends I hadn't spoken to in months, like spoken properly, because I feel like, I think my generation have this thing of like sending texts, but they're not really communicating. They're just like a meme or just something stupid.
Yeah.
So you're not really communicating. And even though I had been on my screen or my phone all day because of the way things are now, which I'm really not liking, I sense myself being on my phone more, but it's just because it's where my friends are, it's where my job is, it's where everything is right now. And even though I didn't really want to be on my phone, I felt so much better after, like, we spoke for like 2-3 hours and I didn't even realise the time that went by.
Well, that sounds really positive.
So I think even though
have you arranged that you're going to talk again?
Possibly. We said maybe we should make it a weekly thing.
Good.
So I think you say that, but I think until you actually do it, you say, I don't want to look at my screen. But if you actually have a nice, pleasant conversation, I don't think you realise that you're staring at a screen.
No, well, that's why when I talk to people maybe I didn't make this clear, it's not as though I stop talking to people in the evening. I do, as you know, but I tend not to Zoom them. I tend to actually have a telephone conversation with them instead, which I much prefer.
Yeah. So I think that will be number one. Check up on people. I think, as I said, if for some of us, being at home is not our normal thing.
No.
As much as there's days that I enjoy it, it's not where I'd ideally want to be.
No.
So I think people my age should check up on people that don't live close to any of their friends to go on a walk with, or check up on them, or people that are in a different kind of route than you are, if that makes sense, or
Yeah, they're in a different routine and they might feel comfortable in that routine, even though they are with people.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think people just need to check up on people more. I think I don't know. I think there's normally the one person that kind of checks up on people or texts first, if that makes sense. And I think if you have a friend that is that person, maybe it's time you do the same thing. I think, if that makes sense. So if you feel, oh, they haven't texted me, or they're the ones always text me, maybe you should also check up on them. I don't know. I feel like it's a difficult time because you can't necessarily know how everyone's feeling. And I'm not saying it's not your job to be everyone's therapist at the same time. So you shouldn't be the one checking up on everyone and not checking up on yourself. I think, and I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It makes perfect sense. At the end of the day, put it another way, perhaps, is that you can't always be the responsible one. Everybody needs to, everyone should act responsibly in their own way.
And I think, I'm not saying you have to check up on everyone. Maybe you're not feeling up to it. I understand that. So you don't have to take the responsibility. But maybe if you're not in the mind space to check up on someone, maybe it's time you reach out to someone. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Maybe very practical. I know I'm just making this up. It might sound absolute nonsense. But write down, make a list of who you think your 7 closest friends are and ask yourself, when was the last time I spoke to them? And 7 days a week, you could
speak to one every day.
Speak to one every day.
Yeah. And then I'd say hobbies. Maybe try and find a hobby and connect with people through that hobby, whether it be, online classes, online workout, online. Unfortunately, it might all have to be online.
Well, and that is a problem because a lot of people have had to actually shelve their hobbies because they just require being with other people or being outdoors or whatever it might be.
We have to adapt. Go for a walk every day. Maybe find a neighbour to socially distance and walk with every day. Or someone that needs their dog walked. I don't know. Go feed the ducks in the park. I think also getting outside is a big thing, I would say, for mental health.
And as the weather improves, that will help people. We're getting into spring gradually. Because I think a lot of people just lost the incentive or over the dark winter months. Like, well, yeah, fine telling me I need to get outdoors, but not much of an incentive to do so.
Yeah. And I would say maybe make a routine, like plan your days. That can help.
I think that really helps because otherwise the days begin to merge into one another. Even I was finding that recently. And this is somebody who, self-confess, I don't mind being on my own. But I was beginning to, a couple of weeks ago, feel that the days were almost merging into one another. And I'd got out of the routine of setting myself little tasks and goals every day. So I got back into that, and immediately I felt better that I could say, right, okay, this is what I've done today, or I would get up knowing, right, okay, this is the 2 things that I want to do.
Yeah, and then I don't know. Is it bad to say you can take this time to focus on yourself, focus on self-care, self-love?
You mean the time of the pandemic?
Yeah, this time that you're kind of forced to be alone.
Discover yourself a bit more.
Yeah.
And
get to know yourself again. Pamper yourself a little. I don't know. I'd say that. I think that's what I did a lot of during the first lockdown. I kind of thought, okay, I kind of need to figure out who I am outside of school, outside of, all these things.
But do you think that was also because of where you were in your life, having just graduated? So it's kind of rite of passage.
Yeah, definitely.
You were no longer a student. You were now something else, and you had to define what that something else was.
Yeah.
Well, it's different for me because I'm just a boring old fart and carrying on being a boring old fart.
Yeah, but maybe you can evolve from a boring old fart to something else. That's what I'm kind of saying, that maybe people need to focus on themselves. Maybe it's a good thing. Not good thing, but it could be a blessing in disguise for some people to kind of get back their power, remember who they are, remember their goals, remember their dreams, or establish new ones. I don't know.
Certainly establishing new ones. I think that's very important.
Yeah. Kind of rebalancing, because I feel like a lot of the time, you know, life was very fast paced, and I think it could be difficult to kind of forget because you are so involved in so many things, to kind of get lost in all these things. So maybe it's a time to kind of reevaluate people or things that you need or want in your life, or why you are doing certain things.
Yeah. I think it's also time that we should maybe wrap this up and move
Can
to a
I
conclusion.
finish? Okay. My last pieces of advice.
Right, which is
maybe express those feelings through a journal, art, music, talking to a friend, talking to family, talking to a specialist. Acknowledge and accept your down days. It's normal to have down days, but, you know, maybe with all the things we talked above, try and gradually lift yourself out of them by having a plan, finding a hobby, contacting friends and family. And most importantly, it's not just you. It's a very large population of the globe right now. And I will put in the description of this podcast a bunch of helplines.
That would be really useful.
That are there. Some of them are just there to have a chat. If you feel that you can't talk to your friends, you can have a chat with someone else.
Yeah, you can have a chat with us.
Yeah, there's helplines out there for that. And ways to meet people and friends. And I will link a bunch of stuff in the description. But maybe send a text to a friend after listening to this.
Yeah. Just reach out, as my daughter said. Okay, well, let's see you next week.
Sending you love.
Yeah.
Love. Hope you have a nice day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to go and do some hobbies.